due to the intractable, slow pace manner in which our courts, the judicial system in Nigeria runs. We should have it and possibly update it annually so that it can begin to prick the conscience of those in leadership. We just saw a classic example of a working system. And you know the funny thing, the Finnish government and its citizens really have nothing to lose. It was about terrorism in Nigeria, but they took the gauntlet, ensure a speedy prosecution of the issue, and it was resolved within just few months. But in the theater of the terrorism activity itself, the theater of wanton destruction and killings, we have been on this issue for more than a decade, and we are not making progress. That is something that should bother any government. We are not just losing lives, we are losing economic opportunities. The Southeast, consistently for the past few months, the VAT generated across the country has been the worst from the Southeast. We saw the voters registration that the INEC began a few days ago, the online, before the commencement of the physical voting. The total number that the entire 5 states of the Southeast were able to pull together is not up to what one local government pulled up in Osun State. Any government that is serious should see that as, an emergency that needed to be dealt with, and is largely due to the insecurity in that part of the country.
The
So a whole lot of
insecurity,
work
the
to be learned.
insecurity in the southeast is undeniable. It has been there. But the issue of the Monday sit at home, which has in recent times crippled the economic activities both in the civil service and in the private businesses of individuals in the southeast. However, when it comes to the matter of Nnamdi Kanu himself, it appears that there are people who are of the opinion that maybe, just maybe, the federal government is still keeping Nnamdi Kanu for political reasons, maybe for electioneering period, to perhaps release him during elections to gain the favor of the Southeast. But whether that is true or not, how will that affect the instability that is already in the Southeast, and how can we restore that once vibrant Southeast that used to be a business hub, that used to generate a lot of VAT, a lot of internally generated revenue and all of that? There is a systemic problem, and that is what I want you to proffer solutions to this morning.
Yeah, thank you for redirecting our conversation. I was actually trying to state the fact the way to change the current situation in the Southeast is that we must quickly, expeditiously resolve the legal logjam on Nnamdi Kanu. We have to resolve that. Because as long as people think that they are unfairly treated, you can't use the barrel of gun to resolve that. So that's why we have army, you have the mobile police, you have the regular police in the Southeast, and they've not been able to make the needed impact that you actually really needs to get there. Let me paint a picture for you. When terrorism ravaged the Northeast and military, during the height of the terrorism in the Northeast, and the military people were deployed there, every roadblock by the military was actually lauded by the citizenry because they saw it as a protection for them. Juxtapose it with what we have in the Southeast. They, instead of commending and lauding the great job that our military they are doing in the Southeast, they looted them. They are hated. You need to see the negative aspersion and tirades that people are casting on our military, because there is an insecurity or there is an injustice perception in the heart of the average Southeasterner. So resolve this head or tail. If the court says he should be set free, set him free. And about the political, whether he will be used for a political this thing or not, I think that's been in the mix for a long time. But this man has not yet been released. Head of. So how do we resolve this? Deal with the judicial issues. Then people will now know if he's guilty or not. Like what we saw in Finland. They had to go and look at the trail of his spending. They saw that truly was sharing money to buy arms and send to people in Nigeria. So it's clear. So there's no way you can say that's injustice. It was clear. Do the same for Nnamdi Kanu. If you see that he had actually supported, he has financed, or somehow raised, and you can prove that in court, let the document be open source. Let's have an idea to. Now, that simply means that a number of people who felt that you were treating him unfairly because he's an Igbo man, you have to back a number of those people. Then you can now face the restoration of redevelopment on the ground in the Southeast. That for me is a major foundation. In back, the confidence of the average Southeasterner. Then we can now start talking about restoring real growth and development in the Southeast.
One of the calls
Any
that
other way this,
Yeah.
we are just scratching the surface. We will not be able to make the needed inroad to restore order and development to that part of the country.
very, very wonderful calls you have made there, Mr. Seun Oni. One of the calls that the federal government is making is for, Biafran agitators to lay down their arms and embrace peace. But we have not really seen any committee. We have not really seen any commission or any move at all from the part on the part of the federal government in order to negotiate. I remember there was a time when members of IPOB were calling for what they termed as a referendum, between them and the federal government, but that has not been heeded by the federal government. While we continue to call for these agitators to lay down their arms and embrace peace, what is the federal government doing? Deliberate steps being taken by the FG to ensure that negotiations are made in order to convince them to embrace peace.
I think your question seems to be more like a building from the roof. In my opinion, it should have been, what are the governors doing?
And not the federal not the federal government.
Yeah, not the federal government. Because it's like my opinion severally on this platform.
Yeah.
We have a tendency of overstretching the responsibilities of the federal government. But the insecurity in the Southeast has the primary constituent and impact on the citizenries in the Southeast, not in Abuja, not any other part of Nigeria. But we have not seen their governors working as a team. We saw that in the Southwest during the height of the peak of kidnappings in the Southwest. God bless his soul, the late Akeredolu of Ondo State. He rallied his colleagues in the Southwest, and all they did was work as a team. That was when we had the invention of the Amotekun Corps that we have across the Southwest today. We are not seeing that in the Southeast. What we are seeing is individual efforts. We have seen how, for instance, the Anambra State Governor, Professor Charles Soludo, had ensured that he, midwifed Anambra security, internal security arrangement.
That's the Bubago.
The Bubago. We saw the state governor also trying to do his own thing.
Yeah.
But the feelers we have gotten from the Southeast is that these guys actually now run not intrastate affairs. They run interstate across the south. So you need the governors to work as a team in arresting this drift. It is when they now do this and they require the support, like what we saw in the southwest. The Amotekun need to carry gun, at least some level of sophistication. They needed some level of trainings, and they spoke with the federal government, and the federal government gave them the needed support. So they need to sit down, craft a local solution. Then they can now call on the federal government to help them achieve this local solution. But what we have seen is that each one sits in his own turf and wants to craft his own, what we call, specific solution.
His own solution and his own style of approach to the insecurity matter.
His own style.
Technically, we are also sort of seeing like some sort of state policing, policy from these governors in their various states, even though it's not the, proper state policing structure as we know it to be.
Yeah, but it's not working. They need to work as a team so that they can now arrest this drift. Like the general you cited, some of the videos that were shown was very clear that he actually had his tentacles across Imo into neighboring Anambra, and you have this type of thing. My concern really is that when it comes to landmass, the southeast is the most contagious. All right, it's a very contiguous state. It's not having very wide landmass like we have in the northeast, like we have in the north central. It's not so, not so geographically wide that they can police it. If they work together as a team, craft out their very unique solution, and now get the required support, whether militarily or tactically, from the federal government or the federal government agencies, in this case, maybe the NSA, the defense chiefs, and of course, the National Police Force.
Now, Mr. Seun, before we move on to yet another matter, let me just get your final take on this. There have been calls made by the federal government for the repatriation of Simon Ekpa to face criminal charges here in the country. Should that be a call? Is that a timely call? And also, do you think that Finland would perhaps adhere to the calls made by the FG?
Well, that's in the remit of whether Finland we accept or not. I think it's more of a diplomatic conversation. But in my opinion, I think it's needless. You'll be bringing that man, then will be the mega resources, very meager resources we have here, we'll be expending it on prosecution, going through. It's needless. He's been convicted there. Let him spend his time there. Let's focus. The one we have on our neck is more than 10 years. We've not been able to do anything serious moving forward. Focus on Nnamdi Kanu. Deal with him, legally. And if the court set him free, set him free. If the court convicts and sentences him, let him be sent to the jail. I think focus on that. That's, for me, should be our priority now. Not acting for Simon Ekpa to come to either Kuje or come to any of our prisons here, and it becomes our responsibility again. I learned he's a Finnish citizen, so he should stay there and spend his time in jail.
All right, Mr. Seun, quite wonderful justice you've done to this conversation. Let's move on to yet another security issue, and this time around it's coming from our very dear friend, the former governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, who accused the federal government of, kissing bandits. I will say, in his words, he said that the federal government is patronizing terrorists with stipends and food. Now, these are the allegations of the Kaduna ex-governor. I believe you got wind of this comments, and of course the responses made by the Minister for Information, Mohammed Idris, alleged Mohammed Idris, to the former Kaduna State Governor. What are your thoughts?
Unfortunately, my position seems to differ from a lot of things I've been seeing, whether it's in the traditional media or on the social media. I think this is not the Nasir El-Rufai that I know. I think something is wrong with him psychologically, because his positions and submissions are so incoherent. That's not the signature Nasir El-Rufai that I know. Some of the things he was saying, he was part of ADC, for instance, and practically everything he said, instead of promoting the ADC, we are destroying the ADC. So when it came to the subject of insecurity during his tenure in Kaduna again, everything he said seems more to paint him in negative light than to even salvage his image that has been terribly battered across Kaduna State. On the subject of the federal government kissing terrorists, the moment he said that, when I watched the video, I didn't follow the live, but eventually when I watched the video, I think it was just true to several other things I saw. It's not the El-Rufai I know, because when he made that statement, when you tie it with his 8 years and some of the previous comments he has made before now, it tells you really that he wanted to launder his own image, but he was doing a very terrible job about that. Have we heard situations where those who have been incarcerated, kidnapped by these kidnappers, had called for ransom? I think it's no longer news. It's widespread. It happens every other day. But can we call it a a state-sanctioned thing? That's the thin line. And he struggled, when I watched the video, to convince us that it's a state-sanctioned program. And for someone who was governor of a state that was notorious for kidnappings for 8 years, I think that position, in my opinion, seems more like a political statement than the fact. What we saw, remember that university where they kidnapped their students in Kaduna? I'm struggling to get the name of the university now.
Okay.
The private university where the students were kidnapped, lecturers were kidnapped for many months in Kaduna. We knew how they were released. Ransoms were paid, and some of these ransoms, they don't just ask for ransom. By the way, there was one that happened just a few weeks ago. Someone I knew personally was kidnapped, and it was funny. The bandit requested that they should bring money, bring foodstuff, and they asked for some wraps of India hens before they will release the people that were kidnapped.
Now, Mr. Sean, before you carry on, there was a comment you made earlier where you said that you cannot state whether or not some of these ransoms paid to kidnappers were sanctioned by the state governments. But we have seen the Zamfara state government, even beyond Kaduna State, we've seen the Zamfara state government on several occasions, not just one time, paying ransom to bandits to release its citizens who have been kidnapped. In fact, it has been in the news. This is public knowledge to everybody. So I think that is where the former Kaduna State Governor is coming from. Even though during his time as governor, there was also a very high level of insecurity in Kaduna State, but we cannot refute the fact that some state governors in Nigeria have and are still paying ransom to bandits.
Let me pick the word state sponsor there.
Okay.
In political science, the narrow use of state to refer to sub-government is actually not so not so generally acceptable. And I think in the context of El-Rufai's statement, when he says state, he was actually referring to the federal government. And that's why you saw that the reactions came in drove from the presidency, from the NSA. Of course, I'm aware that we've had governors like we've had Kaduna State Government, we've had Zamfara State Government, and of course a number of other state governments who negotiated and paid ransoms to some of these people. But don't forget that the context of El-Rufai's statement was about the federal government. And what we have seen is that sometimes out of desperation, and you can't blame families who have their loved ones in kidnappers den for some of them for months, and the kidnappers now send a message to them, like the picture I was painting. They sent a direct message to the relatives. If you want us to release these folks, send so amount of money, send so bag of rice and indomie and the rest of them. And they also requested that they add India hemp for them. You know, from the feelers I got from the family, they had to apologize that, okay, let's monetize your India hemp money because there is no way we can get it. So that's the point I'm trying to make, that we have individuals out of desperation negotiating, paying ransoms. We've had, like what you also said, we've had state government just getting tired of the operations and the heinous crimes of these folks, negotiating. But we don't have it on record yet. The federal government making it a policy of state to sponsor, to give food, and like he said, paying stipends to these terrorists. So it's just a cheap shot as, of course, now an opposition figure to the federal government. That's the position I was trying.
Mr. Seun, when you make comments like, saying that the state governments at some point got tired of the whole insecurity issue and decided to just pay the ransom for the, citizens who have been kidnapped or the kidnapped victims to be released, is this portraying a good picture, especially on the side of the state governments, whether in Zamfara or in Kaduna State or anywhere at all in the country, especially when it comes to the authority and superiority of our armed forces or security forces over these bandits, over these terrorists, over these kidnappers? It doesn't seem like it's painting a good picture now, is it?
Definitely, there is no way paying ransom would be a good optics.
Exactly. So how did we get here? How did we get to the point where a state governor will eventually succumb to the requests and the demands of bandits and pay ransom to them?
Well, a number of factors, but let me just major on two of them. The first one is that I think, will I say statistically now, or the fact they are everywhere for anyone to verify that the poorest part of the country is actually the part of the country that is the most bedeviled by this escalating insecurity. So that tells you likely the level of insecurity we are seeing across the length and breadth of Nigeria today is partly tied to leadership failure to provide respite and decent sources of life for its citizenry. The second thing, of course, would be the level of fanaticism we have seen, that people at some point now felt some of this wicked act is their own way of serving God and is very terrible. So there are several other factors, like I said. And so the state governors, for instance, who had been the worst hit with the level of banditry we have seen, go across these state and local governments. There was a trending video a few days ago about a governor, of course in the north, who was going to sympathize and commiserate with a village that was badly hit by bandits. And we saw the type of road he traveled through, the terrain, how terrible those roads are, the roads he passed to the place, how practically impassable it was. In fact, some of the vehicles in his entourage broke down. And he had, you know, hundreds of armed men. It's in the video, so it's not a hundreds. I counted up to 90 something, then I got tired because I wanted to be sure whether they are up to 100 or not. So they are actually more than 100 armed people that followed him to go and commiserate with people who are mourning. And the people in these villages, they don't even have something as simple as a police post. So it's a leadership issue, whether on the level of policing, on the level of development in this part of the country, that now made people, it was trending at some point, that some of these people are recruited into kidnapping and banditry for as low as 5,000 naira.
Well. In contrast to that, I just want to lay out this point before we let you go in a couple of minutes. A recent report states that Nigerians in the last 1 year paid ransom to bandits at a staggering 2.57 billion naira in just 1 year. 2.57 billion naira to bandits in ransom payment, whether from individuals, whether as a group, whether from state governors who continue to pay ransom to these bandits because they are tired. It is disturbing, Mr. Seun. It is really disturbing. What is your own position on this?
It is disturbing. I think we have said the same thing, that the level of insecurity we have seen, especially when it comes to kidnappings and banditry, is a disturbing trend. And at the root of this disturbing trend is the failure of leadership, whether security-wise or when it comes to the economic advantages that people should enjoy that they are not enjoying, and they have to fall into despair. And some felt that recruiting them by maybe regular 5,000, 10,000 stipends will do the magic. We've seen police parading some of the arrested folks, and they are asked, what is your share out of this kidnapped sum? And the big guys are the ones collecting the millions. Some of these guys who carry the guns and who are their foot soldiers, they are paid as low as 10,000, 20,000 to be in this business. So that tells you something is wrong in our leadership, and we must get it right.
All right, Mr. Seun, it's been wonderful having this conversation with you. Quite interesting positions you have taken on the matter of insecurity, both on the Simon Ekpa case and, of course, on the issue of banditry and kidnapping in the northwestern part of the country, which is now starting to gradually creep into the north central part. Always a pleasure to have this discussions with you on Morning Express. We thank you so much and wish you the very best of the rest of your day.
Thank you for having me, and do have a radiant day too.
Thank you. Well, that has been Mr. Seun Oni, Editor-in-Chief at the Daily Courier, speaking to us on matters of national interest, particularly on insecurity.